So we're talking today about building products at a global scale. As we have worked with products, as I've worked with products, and I'll talk a little bit about myself, but as I've worked with products, more and more I've realized that you need to think that the market has become global. As you start designing your products, if you don't take the global market space, the global customer in mind, you might make some design decisions and choices that can hurt you in the long term and can be expensive, both from an engineering standpoint as well as even a go-to-market standpoint. So today, Sylvie and I are going to talk about how to engage with customers globally, how to work with global teams, and also how to think about global products. What I want to suggest is let's keep this interactive.
Yeah.
And there's quite a few folks who have varied experiences, and we want to learn from everyone's experience here rather than just me and Sylvie telling you what it should be.
Yeah, and also we have prepared a story, right, like a slide deck, but and we started doing it before we started, but we want to understand why you guys are here, if you have specific questions that we need to address, so that we'll make time for that. And I started writing some of the topics that seem to come up. So I think some of you are here to just understand what a product manager does on a high level, hopefully also a program manager at this point. We talked about metrics of customer success. Customer success is a nascent, school of thought that is becoming more and more important for companies, in addition to sales and marketing. And so, what are the metrics that we use to determine that? Another question that we had is how do we prioritize feature when we develop products? Especially when you were thinking about global products. Are we starting with a specific market, and then are we changing and adjusting the feature, or are we upfront thinking about the global market as well? Very, very briefly about myself. So I'm originally from Europe. I grew up in Switzerland, and I started my career at a consulting company doing program management, so leading different projects, specifically in Europe, but also moved 5 years ago to the US. So I have experience in North America and in European markets as well. Currently, I'm a principal program manager at Amazon, working very closely with Dhananjay. And the way I like to explain it is we have our organization is organized we are a program in general, and the program has different pieces to it. There is the product piece, which is what obviously Dhananjay is here for, but then you have other pieces like the marketing, which helps you to drive adoption of those products. There is the piece of like customer success, and how do we make sure that we listen to our customer, we gather feedback, and then we collect that feedback and give it to the product managers to make sure that they actually develop products that are relevant to them. And so the way I like to think about it is I'm across the program, very broad. My role is very broad, but and Dhananjay is very much more into the depth of like the technical depth and the depth of the product itself. So this is about me.
Okay.
Maybe you
Let
go.
me cover.
Yeah.
So hi everyone, I'm Dhananjay. I am a product manager, PM technical, as Amazon, we call it in Amazon, but basically a product manager. So my focus is on taking customer requirements that comes from Sylvie's team, understanding the global market space, designing a product, working with the engineering team, and then making sure in a highly iterative fashion, if it's meeting the customer's needs, is it meeting the market's needs, understanding the adoption, and then working with marketing, global teams, which again goes back to Sylvie, to make sure that there are programs in place that can deliver this product and operate it. Currently, as you know, with the flattening of the globe, flattening of the markets, every product that we do is global. I started back after graduating with my master's in computer science as a developer at Microsoft, worked on a lot of these operating systems and also enterprise software to manage those operating systems, including Azure Cloud most recently. Then I moved over to working at Avanade, and I was helping lots of enterprise customers to adopt the cloud. Everybody knows we want to adopt cloud. They don't know what to do with it. And that's where I realized that cloud has made it possible for anybody out there in any region, whether it's US or Europe or Asia, to be able to spin up resources and spin up compute storage network in a very easy fashion. And that has really led to global product development even more. After that, I worked at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, which is downtown, building infrastructure cloud again, the V2. And again, Oracle also had global customers. Did a short stint at a startup. What was interesting at the startup is I was working on Kubernetes. How many people know about Kubernetes? Yeah. It's a developer platform for managing cloud scale applications if they're containerized, right? So basically, enterprises were getting into Kubernetes, and it was amazing how many of those customers were global. So even as a startup, there were two aspects of global product development that I had to learn. One is that your customers are going to be global. So as a startup, you got to be careful and nimble. But at the same time, you got to make sure that you have a strong customer base that's giving you recurring revenue and not try to expand too fast. But the other thing that was interesting, which one of the gentlemen in the back said, is that we were a global team. Because as a startup, we couldn't afford to get the best talent all from Seattle, given we are competing against my current company and my previous companies, and then the new companies that are coming here. So we started becoming a global team, and that's where I learned global first culture of working. And very much like you said, unless you're a global first culture, and if you're the only person isolated trying to make it global, it's very hard. So I'm going to talk about how to bring in global first culture. So as you start working with global teams, you'll become successful at doing it. And I would love to hear your thoughts in the back too. So that's a bit about myself. So I really have realized over the years that global products have become more and more common. Everything's becoming global. The technology improvements that I talked about is bridging the gap between time zones, between countries, but yet there are certain subtle things when you work globally that you have to keep in mind, which Sylvie is going to talk about. Products have become worldwide day one. Right now at Amazon, both Sylvie and I work on the Amazon affiliate marketing team, which means we help affiliates, which are anybody, like even I'm an affiliate. Basically, anyone who wants to build up a website and sell Amazon products through their website gets what you can call a commission for every sale that they make. So there are thousands and literally millions of websites out there and hundreds of thousands of just regular people. Like there is one couple, they have a website called Long Long Honeymoon. And they go on honeymoon and they post YouTube videos, and then they talk about what they purchased from Amazon to make that trip happen. And then they put that on their website. They have a large following, so they are an influencer. And when their followers click through on it, they get a commission out of it. That's what funds their entire next trip. So they're making enough money by just creating a simple website or a YouTube channel. And we build the technology to power them. The important thing that came to me when I started working on a feature is that day one, when somebody is an influencer, their followers are not going to be regional. Everybody around the world watches YouTube. Everybody does Instagram. So I made some design decisions which came back to hurt me to say, oh, I should have thought that though our customer is US-based, their following can be global. So I'll talk a little bit about that when we go through it. There are some advantages of being global. My team is not here. My team is, the engineering team is in India. There are some engineering teams which are in Seattle. The sales teams are all over the world, and Sylvie helps me connect with them. So we can be closer to the customer, we can be closer to the talent, and that's the benefit of being global. That's why even if you're a small startup, you want to think about how you can do. Even in our startup, we had a developer who was based in Australia. So imagine, all US time zones, all 4 of them, and working with Australia. When I was at Avanade Accenture, I had an engineering team in 5 time zones in 3 countries, 3 continents. So I had a US-based architect, and I was based in Seattle, one in New York. There were other data architects based in UK, Italy, and I think one of them was in Spain. And then I had an engineering team that was also sitting in India. And imagine doing meetings across those time zones. It was very hard. But I'll share some tricks. So those are the disadvantages. Collaboration does get harder if you've not planned for it. You can do round-the-clock delivery. So I write a PRFAQ, is what we do in Amazon in previous it is spec or requirements, and I will send it to the engineering team. Next morning, I have a costing from them as to what is the t-shirt size cost. So there are some advantages if you keep that in mind. Physical and cultural gaps are important to understand. Especially one of the interesting things that I found is that you need to know the calendars and holidays in multiple countries. You can't plan a date and say, I'm going to deliver on that date, and then find out that there were general elections going on in India. So we had to move the date in the last minute because we didn't. And by the way, general elections in India go for, I think, 2 months or something like that, because it's such a big country and a big democracy. So it sometimes can be a disadvantage if you don't plan for it. You have to be very planned, very organized. Any other thoughts for people who have worked with global teams? Did they find this as an advantage or disadvantage? Both. Exactly.
Sorry, I think if you are able to bring together and work with the differences, it's a huge advantage. That's my personal opinion. So and I can talk a little bit about my experience working with different culture very briefly. So as you know, worked in Europe, different languages, cultural differences. We think about Europe being one unique thing, but it's not the case by any means. People have, through their cultures, also diverse goals, right? Like if I recall a specific example, I was working for a company that was a UK company, but had a subsidiary in Italy. And so basically the language is the official company language is English. And so everybody's in meetings should speak English. And so you would go to Rome for those big meetings, and then we would discuss something in a meeting in a room, and then everybody would go out, get a coffee, and then start talking in Italian and make those big decisions outside the boardroom. And so that was really, it's really challenging. Luckily, I was speaking the language, but you have to kind of understand those cultural differences to make sure that you align with people and you make sure that they are on your side. Another thing that I think it's really important when you specifically are working with different culture is taking out, and I think this is true for everything, taking out the personality or what's personal about a thought. People usually don't argue if you bring facts, right? You can think about the way you position things, or you position topics. You can think about the way you're saying it, when you're saying it, but true facts, people has a hard time arguing, and so that was a little bit my strategy going in. and also understanding where they're coming from. So things that seems normal to you might not seem normal to them, and so really being humble, understanding what's going on, trying to understand their agenda up front. It's also really important and has been super valuable for me. So if I have an advice to give, just try to establish a personal relationship with your customers or with your product manager as well. Try to use video calls as much as you can. When we do India calls, for instance, we always have our video on, not because, sometimes it's late in the evening or early in the morning, I want to be in my PJs taking the call from home, but I make an effort to show that it's me, so they can put a face to my voice. They know who I am, and they even say, I was talking to Dhananjay, they even say, oh, why is your video not on if you're not doing it? So which is it's a good testament of they're feeling that you're there. So I think at the end of the day, those little tricks help you establish that relationship over time. So one thing that I thought it would be interesting for me to talk about, and there are some questions that came up related to customer success. As I mentioned before, this is a very nascent, topic. People or companies before really focus on the sales organization, which is driving revenues. They think about marketing, which through marketing campaign, you have a return on investment. But then the third pillar that I think it's becoming more and more important is customer success. And especially in this world where we have a lot of information, we're global. How do we make sure that we listen to our customer, and how do we make sure that our customers stay with us, because they have so much options to go elsewhere. So what's customer success? So customer success is it's a school of thoughts that helps customer get the maximum value out of a product or a service, and it's basically listening to our customers to make sure that we gather that feedback, consolidate that feedback in a way that then we can share with product managers, and based on that they can identify problem areas, new opportunities, and then they can prioritize those using a framework and deciding then to write requirements about it. I think why customer success is important. For sure, it's important because if you think about the customer first, you're going to develop products that actually customer want to use, right? There are many examples, and Dhananjay can talk more about it, where engineers go in a room and then they start developing something, and there are some requirements, but they're not well taught, and so they get ahead of it, and they develop something that if they don't get customer feedback early on, it's not really the optimal product for them. And that's why, by the way, product managers are so important, because they're also listening to what customers are saying and translating that into requirements.
You follow the customer journey and you understand how do you capture metrics to measure that journey. So at the time of customer acquisition, many of the metrics are around, are we capturing the funnel appropriately? So for example, in the current world, we have lots of customers who come in and they sign up as associates. And there are some good associates, some of them are not good associates, and they end up being unhappy customers. So are we capturing the right customers? Are we retaining those customers? In a SaaS world, when I was working on cloud products, we actually had metrics around trial periods, how many drop-offs happened after trial, how many of those were retained, what kind of subscriptions did they sign up for, how long did they go, how long did the retention happen, how much attrition are we getting, and are there upsell opportunities that they're taking care of. So that happens during the customer sign up. Once the customer has signed up for a SaaS service, The other aspect that we started working on, even when I was at Kubernetes, is giving a dashboard that talks about how much are they consuming. It's important as a product manager to know, are there metrics around consumption of your service? So consumption would be, especially in enterprise cloud, how much storage are you using? How much network bandwidth are you consuming? How many machines, how many servers? And are you using them efficiently? Is the customer using them efficiently? What's the size of the customer? All of this data, because of a global cloud-based service that is always on, is available to you. And it's important to have these metrics in place at the beginning. Then the third part comes where Sylvie was talking about customer support. How many incidents, how many failures have we had? What's the mean time to resolution when a customer calls? You want to have sales metrics that go around understanding the sales funnel, and also engagement metrics. How is the engagement at every stage in the customer journey, whether it's pre-sales, early sales, technical sales, or even during the entire period of the customers using your product. In the startup, we actually had a VP of customer success, which was entirely a different role from sales. And the advantage when I studied about should we really do customer success, because in large companies, it's a little bit different. With larger organization, that job has to scale much more. In a smaller organization, the VP of customer success is really responsible for customer engagement, right? And how can you retain that customer? What happens is in an enterprise sales team, the customer gets handed off from sales, pre-sales to marketing so they are kind of making that journey, and somewhere along the line, there is no consistency in the experience. And so things get dropped and the customer satisfaction gets dropped. The second thing is each organization is fine-tuned, whether it's marketing, they're focused on their metrics around measurements, around messaging, how their campaigns are working. Whether it's pre-sales, they're more about, did I close this deal? Whereas a person who is doing customer success, their entire focus is customer, right? And so they don't want to just close the deal. They want to make sure that the customer had the best experience. So having customer success as something that spans all of these, but at the same time, they don't have a commitment around, they should do X amount of sales, or they should have so many support calls handled. That makes it slightly a different emerging term where there's more focus on the customer rather than, hey, did I make the sale? And in fact, what experiments have found out, I don't have the data explicitly right now because it was a while back, that having that role actually improves customer satisfaction and actually helps all the organizations that this customer success works with. But it takes time to prove it, as Sylvie said, because it's all this new evolving way or methodology of thinking about customer success.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think the way one way to explain it is it's across the life cycle, right? When you are in the customer acquisition, even before you acquire, think about the way you're positioning your brand, the way you're positioning your products, the way you're acquiring, reaching out to your customers, right? That's where the journey starts. And then you acquire them, they're your customer, but they're just new, and you have to build up that trust and relationship. And marketing it's involved as well, right? It's not just about the product and the development of it. So it's a much broader view than just there is sales, there is marketing, and there is customer success.
So what does a global product imply? And I think some of the questions were great, is that you need to start thinking about a product globally from day one. Otherwise, you might end up making some decisions. And it's kind of interesting, if you don't start talking to customers globally, you might make certain decisions that may be harmful for you in the long term. So for example, this feature I started working on, which was helping customers buy products in Amazon.com. Now, when we focused on helping our influencers get their followers to buy products at Amazon.com, I realized that, hey, an influencer could be anywhere around the world. Imagine if you're in the UK and the follower of the influencer is in UK, the influencer is in US, and then the follower clicks on buying, and most of these are on Instagram, so buying a dress or buying shoes, you end up in a Amazon.com where you can't make a purchase because you're based in the UK or in India. So right away, it was important for me to work on a feature, and Amazon has this feature, by the way, now, so it's not, which detects where the customer is from and directs them to the right marketplace. So now if you go to UK and you're actually purchasing on a web-based Amazon.com, it will actually redirect you to Amazon.co.uk.
So same link, but
Same link, but it goes to, yes. And we also look for an equivalent product. The other thing I realized when I started designing is understanding, so one gentleman asked a question like, how do you decide if there are conflicting requirements from different markets? How do you make prioritization decisions based on that? Well, as any product manager would do, you look for data. So if you're working on a product or a feature that requires mobile, or it's basically for mobile users, you're going to get a different experience whether you do it in US or you do it in Europe, where mobile is used a lot, or you go to India. What social media apps are used in the US are different from the ones that are used in Europe and ones used in India. So for India, when I go to India, everybody uses WhatsApp. And here people are using Instagram, Snapchat, and what have you. So it's important to keep that in mind. So when we did prioritization, we had to look at not just the US market, but other markets where the followers are from and where the influencers are from. And that data, that metric on what is the market size, what is the target opportunity, what is the reach of the platform on which this capability will be developed, and understanding what is the growth potential for that market based on the country that you're looking for. Having that data is extremely important. The other question was like, what tools do you use to analyze this data? There is no standard, to be honest. I haven't seen any standard. I think as product managers, tool become a secondary part. I've worked from large corporations in small companies, and there was always a way to resourcefully find out what are the right tools, especially if you're in a big company. So I don't have any, unfortunately, tool recommendations for doing this data analytics, but what is important is to understand what metrics you need to do for doing market sizing, market segmentation, understanding the size of the market, understanding the opportunity, CAGR. All of these data points are important, and you'll always find the resource to get that information. Validate that, and then make your decisions. Do competitive analysis. That's another way to find out. Like, just because US has a market where there is certain competition, you may have different competitive pressures coming in different markets. Another interesting thing that we found out is, and we had to customize this metric, is I work on a feature which is basically an API to go to all of Amazon's product catalog. And we are rolling out, Sylvie's global team is helping roll out in different countries. Guess what? When you roll out a feature, a cloud-based feature to a different country, what are the specific concerns that might come up? Can folks think about it?
Data privacy.
Data privacy, excellent. Data privacy is one of them. Internationalization, globalization, and localization, right? Data privacy issues, specific rules and laws. So I'll talk about what these mean. Globalization is you basically want to build a software that can be done globally. So, for example, like I said, my API helps our associates programmatically get access to any item that is in the Amazon catalog, right? Now, if I'm doing this from Turkey, do you think it makes sense to have the information from US? No, it should go to the Turkish marketplace and seek that. Does it make sense to have that information in English? No. So you got to get that information in the local language, and that goes into localization of that feature. So basically you want to have the specific language of preference. So globalization is building a product in such a way that it can be easily tailored to any part of the globe. Whether you're changing currency, whether you're changing language, whether you're changing other aspects of your features. One interesting one was one data privacy rules, especially when you go into Europe. Data privacy rules become important. Whereas in my original home country, now I'm in the US for the half of my life, but my original home country of India, data privacy is out of the door. Like, you can collect any data that you want about anyone, right? And there is no data privacy laws yet implemented in that country. That's a mixed blessing. As a product manager, you can do a lot more experimentation in India than you can do in other countries. So there are some things that work in your favor. The other thing that I learned, that because we give out information about the product, pricing information is really important for many of our customers. They want to show the price when they want to buy something. Well, in certain countries in the Europe, you can't give a price that is older than 30 minutes. So if the price of an item changes in 30 minutes, and if you put it on your website as a stale price, that is actually a violation of the rule. I don't know how our airline companies, US-based airline companies would do it. Like, every time I go to Expedia and click on something, oh, no, the price just went up when you actually tried to buy it, right? And that is a very jarring experience for our customer. So understanding the local laws and designing that feature to go from, in US, when I ask someone, like, how current do you want the price to be? Oh yeah, once a day, just give me the price. As long as it's current at some time of the day, I'm okay. 24-hour delay is fine. Taking that 24-hour delay into a 30-minute delay, latency, that's a huge requirement change that will make me design that product again, right? So base your metrics based on those. So when I write the requirements, I actually try to understand each country requirement specifically. Are there any specific laws? So I started creating this list of questions working with Sylvie. And anytime someone pops up from a specific region and says, I want your feature on my region, I send them a long list of 15 questions. Can you answer this for me? Because that will help me understand before I turn on something in your region, which is just a mechanical change for my engineering team. But from a product standpoint, is this the right product for that region? And once I've done that, I also have metrics to understand, is it going to get used? What we found is we turned on a feature when I was in the cloud infrastructure team in one of the countries, but the country's general market was not ready for those features. So we ended up overspending on capacity. One of the things we always forget, especially for cloud-based products, is that you have operational cost. So just to keep something running, because you may get a customer, you're going to incur cost. And so keep that in mind when you're thinking globally, is there sufficient demand? Just because you have a feature available, don't turn it on in that country, because there may not be enough demand. Even if you have complied with all the laws, you've complied with all the requirements, keep the operational cost in mind. So globalization is about that. Regionalization and localization is actually going even more local. And you want to understand, like, how much local can you go? For example, there are certain countries which don't have their own marketplace, but they are served from another marketplace. But there are certain items in those marketplaces that cannot be shipped in that neighboring country. Especially in Europe, there are a lot of countries that are neighboring. So they might use the UK marketplace, but UK may not be able to ship certain items or certain products to that country. So now you have to keep that in mind, is that now if you're going even more regional, there's another aspect, is that you carve out a specific region and then you start designing features based on region. But we started by designing based on global. Then we understood that there are even regional features as well as local features, country by country, that you need to keep in mind. Now the important aspect becomes execution of, once you've designed, you've done the market analysis, you've understood your customers, now you want to go execute on the plan. And that's where global teams come into play. So global products implied, you want to do market analysis at global scale, competitive analysis, understand your customer. Then you do globalization, localization, and regionalization. And now in the next section, I'll talk about how to work with global teams, how to deliver these products, operate these products, and support it on a global scale.
One question.
Yeah.
This seems like a long tail effect, right? Almost where you have a set of features that you build for certain markets, and those may get like 80% of the revenue or traffic for you, and for the rest of the 20%, you sort of have to spend 80% more effort to localize the product in their particular area to make sure that the privacy laws are met, the GDPR requirements are met. So
Yeah. You want to talk about that?
No, I just want to, I want to say something that, yes, it's true that sometimes, markets, you might think, why should I develop a feature for global market, for a smaller market that is not as attractive in theory. But then if you look at it, I wouldn't look at it as of now, but I would look at the potential of the market. And so sometimes there is the potential of the market, but there is also the fact that you might be saturating in your current market and you need to continue growing, and therefore you need to do that. Specifically, there might be countries that have similar laws, or where similar features might be required, and so you might be able to synergize that. So I wouldn't discount per se a country.
also a thing of you have limited resources at top.
Yes.
How do you make sure that you pick the right ones?
Yes.
And the most growth.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of frameworks out there. One that comes to mind is the RISE framework, which is reach, impact, confidence, and effort. It's basically looking at how many customers are you reaching, what do you think the revenues that you can drive is, are you confident or not that you will be able to execute your solution, and then what's the effort required, because it's a measure of like, this is how much revenue and this is how much effort.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Thanks. And it also depends on what your strategic initiatives are, right? Like Sylvie rightly pointed out, there are, if we just look at the market distribution of many of the products we develop, we will be only a I'm not talking about Amazon, but any product will only become US based, because US is a huge market and China is becoming a big market too, right? But if you design with global mindset, you're going to be able to reap the other markets as they start emerging. At one point, brick was going to be a big market, and it still has some promise. So that's why, as a much more mature product manager, I think it's important to keep that in mind. Good question, though. So it's all about global teams and global teams working together. Shoot, this is going to... Okay, I'm way off. This is this is going crazy. I think it's running out of battery. Okay, remote team. You need to have remote team culture first. So when I was working at a startup, And this is actually real. What happened, what is shown here in the Dilbert cartoon is what would happen. You know, interestingly, I used to work with a product marketing person, a product manager who was sitting next to me. My other product manager was in Philadelphia. And then the engineering teams were spread between Wisconsin, Florida, and so on. And we would have a coffee in near the water cooler, and we would start talking about something. And I said, hey, this is important. We need to get onto Zoom and actually talk to each other on Zoom and invite everybody in the Zoom room in case other people want to hear. So at one point, it became so critical that we started working as a remote team first, that just because there was a large set of folks in Seattle, often we would do this. So it was interesting to see this being done by Dilbert. It's like we would be having coffee. It's like, no, this is important. I think Sam needs to know about it. Let's go to our desk, log into Zoom. Let's go to the product manager channel. If Sam is around, he'll join us, and then we'll have our coffee with Sam. Of course, it was lunchtime for Sam. So, but you need to have a global first mentality. And also remote team mentality. So often our meeting rooms look like this. Everybody, as Sylvie said, is on a video. And that is such a, mentally for our brains, it's such a important aspect of working together as a team. Plan the time zone and hours. As I told you, I was once working with 3 continents and 5 time zones, or maybe 6 time zones. It was really, really important to plan and be measured about what you do. So as an engineer, this is where my engineering background and some of the things we do at Amazon helps. As an engineer, you want to be precise in communication. We actually write everything down on Wiki. You know, Sylvia has written Wiki for every single input process. How are we going to prioritize? Everything is there on a Wiki. So if somebody wakes up in India and they have a question, they can go to this document and they can look at it.
Yeah.
When I have my design meetings,
A wiki is actually a document. It's like a SharePoint document that
yeah.
everybody can access.
A collaboration, yeah. Thank you. It's a collaboration platform. There are others from Atlassian as well, but use a good collaboration platform. Be precise in your communication. So right now, there is like a couple of hours in the evening and maybe a couple of hours in the morning that I get with my engineering team. So we really are thoughtful about what we communicate. I actually write stuff down into a 1-pager or 2-pager, send it out to the team. The team then looks at it, and when we have a meeting, we actually know that we are focusing on making decisions rather than discussing things. So in some sense, yeah, the interaction goes down, but in some sense it becomes more effective. Otherwise, I've seen in some teams that I worked, we would go to a meeting and then we would chit chat and, if it doesn't get done in an hour, we'll keep continuing for another hour. This way, it's a lot more efficient in doing. Webcam should be on all the time. The other thing that we did in the startup is we would record everything that we talked about. So if someone sitting in Australia had a question like, what did you discuss? They can always go to the archive and they can replay that recording. And map your calendars by the region. It's very, very important to understand from all your teams what their local holidays and so on are. And be culturally sensitive. I think Sylvie covered some of this. Now, how did we, when I was at one of the consulting companies, how did we work with global teams? So we designed things together. So we used agile methodology. What we would do is we would have a sprint which was a planning sprint. In the planning sprint, we would actually do architecture sprint as well. So you design things together, and then you split them into components that can be autonomously developed. So each team gets their own component to work on, whether it's the front end, or maybe the middle tier orchestration layer, or somebody is working on the data tier or data analytics. But the way I got this integration done is I would start, given the customer feedback, what is your understanding the persona, what is the end-to-end scenario. So we would have a user story for that sprint that goes end-to-end, all the way through. So for the Instagram case, it was, as an influencer, if I post a link to a product that is clicked by my follower in UK, the follower should be redirected to the nearest marketplace and be able to make a purchase. Underneath this, there was actually 4 teams that worked on that feature, right? And so it was important to know what is the end-to-end story so you can tie those teams together. Then they go in and individually develop and design their features. But then when those things get surfaced at the end of the sprint, you can do an end-to-end demo. Facilitate knowledge transfer. Have specific time periods when the design is being debated, when knowledge can be transferred, especially on end-to-end scenarios. So have certain metrics around execution to be able to do that. What are the key dependencies between the various components? Standardize on the collaboration tools. So if you're using Wiki like we use, then everybody uses Wiki. There's not like a document in an email and Wiki updates over here and some things are in another document somewhere else or a folder. It should all be commonly done, and then that's how you can do global team development.